The mysterious signal. The vastness of space is full of secrets, a never-ending stretch of darkness and stars. Among the many species that roamed the galaxy, the aliens had long believed they knew everything. They had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, each one leaving its mark on the stars. But one quiet, isolated corner of the galaxy held a mystery they had not anticipated: Earth. It all began on the edge of the galaxy, where the alien fleet detected an unusual signal. At first, it was faint, like a whisper lost in the vast silence of space. The alien sensors, designed to scan for anomalies, picked up the signal, but it was unlike any they had encountered before. It wasn't a natural occurrence or a malfunction of their equipment. No, this signal was deliberate, like someone was trying to send a message. But to whom? The signal wasn't anything elaborate or complicated. In fact, it was a simple repeating pattern. It was clear enough for the aliens to understand that it came from a location within the Milky Way, far from most known civilizations. There was something strangely familiar about it, something that pulled at their instincts, urging them to investigate. The leader of the alien fleet, an imposing figure named Zorath, was intrigued by the signal. He was no stranger to exploring the unknown, and this signal was clearly something worth looking into. He ordered his fleet to change course and investigate. The signal's source was traced back to a small, unassuming planet located in a distant part of the galaxy, Earth. As the fleet drew closer to the source, the aliens began to study the signal more carefully. It was simple, almost too simple. A series of pulses sending the same message over and over again. The frequency was consistent, but what was odd was the timing. The signal seemed to be sent at irregular intervals, almost like it was coming from something that had been long dormant, waiting to be activated. Zorath's mind raced as he tried to make sense of it. Who would leave a signal like this, and why? Earth, to the aliens' knowledge, was a planet of little significance. It was inhabited by a primitive species, humans, who had barely begun to explore their own solar system. To the aliens, humans were nothing more than a footnote in the history of the galaxy. They had no interest in Earth, or so they thought. But this signal had changed everything. It was the one thing that had caught their attention, and it had come from a place they hadn't even considered worth looking at. The fleet slowed as they neared the planet, cloaking themselves in the shadows of space. Zorath ordered the first of their reconnaissance drones to launch, sending it toward Earth. The drone was equipped with high-tech scanners, capable of detecting energy signatures, materials, and even the faintest hint of technological activity. The drone descended through Earth's atmosphere, the strange signal guiding its path. The first scan returned results that baffled the aliens. They had expected to find an ancient relic, maybe something left behind by a long-forgotten civilization. But that wasn't what they found. The drone detected an object in orbit around the planet, a massive warship, seemingly abandoned. It was ancient, its design worn and faded, but still unmistakably a warship. Its size was beyond anything the aliens had imagined. It was clear that whoever had built this ship had not only been advanced, but capable of creating something far more powerful than anything they had encountered. Zorath's heart raced. A warship? In orbit around Earth. This wasn't just any ordinary ship. The design was too perfect, too intentional. The ship had clearly been built with purpose, and its presence here could not be an accident. It had to be waiting for something. But what? He ordered the drones to gather more information, scanning the ship's hull, searching for any signs of life. The drones couldn't detect any immediate signs of inhabitants, but the ship's energy systems were still functioning, albeit at a low power. Zorath's curiosity grew, but so did his caution. He had no idea who or what could have built such a ship. He needed to know more. Then, something strange happened. The signal that had originally led them here began to change. The pulses became more intense, more frequent. It was almost as if the ship had awakened, reacting to the aliens' presence. The signal was no longer a simple pattern. It had become a message, a warning. and the aliens had no idea what it meant. Zorath called for a full fleet scan of the warship. He knew that the ship might hold the key to understanding the mysterious signal and why it had led them to Earth. If they were going to unravel this mystery, they would need to approach it carefully. This wasn't just an ordinary discovery. It was something much bigger. As the alien fleet prepared for a deeper investigation, Zorath couldn't shake the feeling that Earth, this tiny, seemingly insignificant planet, had just become the center of something far more dangerous. The signal had led them here for a reason, and whatever secrets this warship held, the aliens were about to find out just how terrifying a simple human creation could be. But little did they know, they had only just scratched the surface. The real mystery was only beginning, and what they would soon discover would change everything they thought they knew about humanity. As the alien fleet silently hovered in the dark vastness of space, the warship they had discovered loomed in the distance. Its shape was large, dark, and ancient, but there was something about it that felt alive. The quiet hum of the fleet's engines and the faint beeping of the scanners filled the control room, but the stillness only added to the tension. Zorath's mind was focused on one thing: the warship. He had never seen anything like it. Not in all his years of exploration, not in all his battles. This ship was different. Its design, though aged, was flawless. Every inch seemed carefully crafted, as if it had been made to endure the test of time. But the most unsettling part was the signal. The ship had sent a message that made no sense, and now the aliens were here, on the brink of uncovering its secrets. "Prepare the scans," Zorath ordered. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed a hint of unease. He had led many missions in his life, but this one felt different. Something about the ship, the signal, and the entire situation felt wrong. Still, there was no turning back now. The fleet's advanced scanning technology began to work in unison. A network of drones and deep space probes were dispatched to get a closer look at the warship. They had been designed to penetrate even the thickest shields and armor. These probes had seen the most dangerous objects in the galaxy and returned with data. Yet this time, it was different. The scans were not returning the usual results. The first probe made its way toward the warship, its sensors sending back images of the massive vessel. But the images were distorted, flickering. Something was blocking the probe's signals, causing a strange interference. Zorath's eyes narrowed in frustration. He had seen interference before, but this felt like something intentional. "Increase the signal strength," Zorath commanded. The probes adjusted their frequency, pushing their energy output to the maximum. Slowly, the interference began to fade, and clearer images of the warship appeared on the screens. What they saw left them in stunned silence. The warship was indeed ancient, but its technology was far from outdated. The exterior was scarred from age, and yet it was almost as if it had been built to withstand battle after battle. The material that made up the hull was unlike anything the aliens had encountered before, stronger than anything in their arsenal, yet flexible, almost alive. The ship seemed to breathe, as if it had a pulse. But the most shocking discovery was inside. The probes scanned deeper, peering into the interior of the warship. Inside, there were no signs of life, no crew members, yet the ship's systems were still running. Energy pulses flickered from the ship's engines, as though it were waiting for something or someone. The power levels were higher than what should have been possible for a ship that had been abandoned for centuries. It was as if it had been maintained by some unknown force, kept alive by a hidden power. Zorath's heart began to race. He had expected to find a derelict ship, perhaps a remnant of a long-dead species, but this was something entirely different. This ship was alive in ways that no one could understand, and what was more terrifying was that the ship's weapon systems were still operational. Weapons of unimaginable power were ready and waiting, as if the ship was still prepared for battle. The fleet's scanners quickly detected something even more disturbing. The warship was not just hiding its power, it was actively protecting itself. The scanners could not penetrate the ship's core. No matter how they tried, The ship's heart seemed to be shielded by some sort of advanced technology, an invisible force that kept them from knowing its secrets. Zorath clenched his fists. This wasn't just a ship. This was something much, much more dangerous. "What are we dealing with here?" Zorath whispered under his breath. His officers were equally unnerved. The data they were receiving was unlike anything they had ever seen. The warship was clearly old, but it had been preserved in a way that defied logic. The technology on board was far beyond the capabilities of the alien fleet. It was a ship built by a species that had mastered the art of war, and its weapons were beyond the comprehension of the aliens. But as the scan continued, a new question emerged. Why was the ship still there? Why had it been left to drift in space for centuries, only now to send a signal to the alien fleet? Zorath felt the weight of that question press on him. He didn't have an answer, but he knew that whatever lay inside the warship's core, it wasn't something the aliens were prepared for. The message that had been sent to them, the signal that had drawn them here, wasn't just a simple call for attention. It was a warning. "We need to learn more," Zorath said, his voice low and determined. "Prepare the crew. We are going aboard." The command was simple, but it carried a heavy weight. The aliens had no idea what they were about to face. The warship had sent them a message, and now they had no choice but to answer. The alien fleet hung silently in space, its ships scattered around the massive warship in orbit around Earth. The mysterious ship had held their attention for days, but the time had come for Zorath and his crew to take the next step. The scans had shown a powerful ancient vessel, but the question remained: what lay inside? Zorath paced in the control room, his mind racing. The data from the probes was unsettling. The ship seemed to possess technologies and weapons far beyond anything the aliens had ever seen. But it was not just the ship's power that concerned Zorath. It was the strange feeling that someone, was watching them, waiting. He had a gut feeling that this was not a normal mission. This was something much larger, something that could change the galaxy. "We've learned all we can from the scans," Zorath said, turning to his officers. "It's time to board the ship." The decision was made. The aliens had no choice but to send a team into the heart of the warship. Their only hope was that they could find the answers they sought. Answers that could explain the signal, the strange technology, and the powerful weaponry that seemed ready to awaken at any moment. The transport pods were prepared, sleek, metallic vessels capable of docking with the warship's exterior. The pods would be their means of entering the ship safely. The alien crew members suited up, their armor reflecting the cold light of the warship in the distance. Zorath looked at his team, each one selected for their skill and experience. They were ready for whatever awaited them, but none of them knew what they were about to face. As the pods launched, the fleet's ships remained on standby, watching from a distance. Zorath's eyes never left the warship as they moved closer. The tension was thick, and even the quiet hum of the pods seemed too loud in the silence of space. The journey to the warship took only a few minutes, but every second felt like an eternity. The massive, hulking form of the warship grew larger as they approached. Its surface was covered with strange symbols and markings, ones the aliens had never seen before. It seemed as though the ship itself was trying to communicate, but the meaning was unclear. The transport pods docked with the warship's outer hull. The air inside was heavy with anticipation. Zorath's team opened the hatch, revealing the dark and eerie interior of the ship. The space was cold and silent, but there was something unsettling about the stillness. It was as if the ship was waiting for them. The team cautiously stepped into the warship, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The walls were lined with ancient alien technology, glowing faintly with energy. It was clear that the ship had been abandoned for a long time, but it still hummed with life, its systems still active. The team's scanners picked up life signs, but they were faint, almost impossible to trace. "Stay alert," Zorath warned. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." They made their way deeper into the ship, moving past rows of dormant machines, strange symbols, and unrecognizable technology. The air was thick with dust, but there was an unsettling sense that the warship was not as empty as it seemed. The deeper they went, the more they felt as though the ship was alive, watching them, waiting for them to make their move. Finally, they arrived at the central control room, the heart of the ship. It was massive, far larger than anything Zorath had ever seen. The room was dominated by a huge console, filled with buttons, switches, and holographic screens, but it was all alien. None of it made sense to the crew. The walls of the room were covered in more strange markings, and at the center of it all was a massive structure that resembled a core or engine. The air around them felt charged, as if the ship was alive, breathing with them. As Zorath approached the core, the strange energy from the ship began to pulse more strongly. The entire room seemed to come alive with power. And then, without warning, the core activated. A bright light flooded the room, and Zorath's team instinctively shielded their eyes. The ship's energy surged, and the room hummed with an almost sentient force. Zorath's heart raced. This was it, the moment they had feared. The core's light dimmed, revealing something that sent a chill through Zorath's entire body. On the walls, holographic images flickered to life, showing alien symbols and text. It was clear that the ship had been designed for something much more than just war. The images depicted civilizations, battles, and something far more terrifying: humans. Zorath's eyes widened in disbelief. The hologram showed humans as they had never seen them before: warriors, survivors, masters of weapons that could rival even the most advanced alien technology. The message was clear: humanity had been far more than a primitive species. They were far older, far more dangerous than the aliens had ever imagined. As the holograms played, a new signal began to broadcast directly into the alien fleet's communications. It was a message, one that Zorath could not understand, but it was unmistakable. The ship was not just sending a warning. It was calling for help. Zorath felt a surge of dread. This was not a ship they had discovered. This was a weapon, a tool of something far older, something that humanity had left behind. The ship had been dormant for centuries, waiting for a moment like this, waiting for the aliens to come. And now it seemed that they had unwittingly walked straight into the heart of something far more powerful than they could ever have imagined. "We've made a terrible mistake," Zorath muttered under his breath. But it was too late to turn back now. The alien crew stood frozen in shock. The room hummed with an eerie energy, the air thick with tension. Zorath's heart pounded in his chest as the holographic images of humans, warriors and survivors, flickered in front of him. It was as if the ship itself was trying to tell them something. But what? Why were these ancient images of humans appearing now, after all these centuries? And why did it feel like they were calling out to the aliens? Zorath's mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The warship, once thought to be a derelict relic, was now alive with strange power. The holograms of humans showed images of battles, vast armies clashing with forces that were beyond comprehension. The humans were not the weak, primitive creatures that the aliens had assumed. No, they were something much more. The core at the center of the room pulsed with light, casting shadows on the walls. Zorath could feel it. The ship was reacting to them, feeding off their presence. The deep hum of the ship's energy intensified, as if it had woken from a long-forgotten sleep. The entire structure seemed to breathe, responding to the commands of an unseen force. "We need to get out of here," one of Zorath's officers whispered, his voice shaky. This isn't right." But Zorath didn't move. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on the holograms. He could see the humans now, standing tall, fearless, in the middle of what appeared to be an epic battle. There was a power to them, a raw, untapped force. These weren't just ordinary warriors, they were something far greater. And then the image shifted, showing a terrifying, colossal warship, one that dwarfed even the alien fleet, leaving behind a trail of destruction. The ship was of human design, unmistakable in its structure. It was ancient, yet far more advanced than anything Zorath had ever seen. It could only be described as a weapon that could lay waste to entire civilizations. It was then that Zorath understood the truth. Humanity had created something beyond the stars, something that had the potential to destroy entire worlds. "What is this?" one of the officers murmured, stepping forward to touch the holographic screen. "These humans, they built this." Zorath turned to him, his voice steady but filled with awe. "Yes, and they are not what we thought they were. They were more than we could ever imagine." The holograms flickered again, and the ship's energy seemed to surge, as though it was waking from a deep slumber. A deep, rumbling sound echoed through the walls, making the crew tense. Something was about to happen, and Zorath could feel it in the pit of his stomach. It was as if the warship was responding to their presence, and now it was ready to reveal its true nature. Suddenly, the entire control room shook. The lights flickered, and the walls seemed to tremble. The core at the center of the room pulsed brighter and brighter, casting an intense glow that filled the space. The holograms of humans disappeared, replaced by an unsettling image, a large, ancient symbol that filled the room. The symbol was unfamiliar, yet Zorath couldn't shake the feeling that it meant something important, something dark. As the symbol lingered in the air, the room was filled with a new sound, low and ominous, like the hum of a distant engine, rumbling through space. It was a noise Zorath had never heard before. It seemed to come from deep within the heart of the ship, vibrating through the walls and into their bones. And then, with a sudden, sharp sound, the core released a burst of energy. The force of it sent the crew members stumbling backward. The ship shook violently, and alarms blared throughout the warship. The walls seemed to pulse with life, the lights flickering in time with the strange energy surging through the ship. Zorath's team struggled to regain their footing, their hearts racing. The ship was alive, more alive than they had ever imagined. But there was no time to think. The signal had changed. It wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a command. The walls of the room began to shift, as if the ship itself were rearranging its interior. The doors that had once been sealed now opened on their own, revealing a vast hallway that led deeper into the ship. It was as though the ship was inviting them to explore further, pulling them toward something. "Do we go deeper?" one of the officers asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "What if it's a trap?" Zorath didn't answer right away. He stood, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. There was danger here, yes, but there was also something else, something far more important. The humans who had built this ship were not just survivors. They were conquerors. And now, it seemed that the ship was calling them to discover the true power it held. Zorath turned to his team. "We have no choice. We need to find out what's inside. What was left behind?" With a deep breath, Zorath led his team down the newly revealed hallway. The ship's interior seemed to change with every step they took. The walls shifted, the air grew colder, and the sense of being watched only intensified. They reached a massive door at the end of the hallway, an imposing ancient gateway that seemed to pulse with energy. It was clear that whatever lay behind this door would change everything. Zorath hesitated for a moment, then placed his hand on the door. The ship responded instantly, the door sliding open with a deep, resonating sound. And what they found inside was beyond anything they could have prepared for. The door slid open with an eerie groan, revealing what lay beyond. The room was unlike anything the alien crew had ever seen. Vast, stretching out far beyond the limits of their comprehension. The walls were made of a strange metallic substance that seemed to shift in color as though the room itself was alive. The floor beneath their feet was covered in smooth, glowing runes, each symbol pulsing with an energy that hummed throughout the space. The air felt thick, almost tangible, as if something ancient and powerful was watching them, waiting. The lights overhead flickered erratically, casting deep shadows across the room, but in the center of it all was a massive structure, an immense core that was unlike anything the crew had ever encountered. It was spherical, suspended in midair by an invisible force, and it hummed with an unnatural power. The entire room seemed to draw its energy from this core, a dark and potent force that sent shivers down Zorath's spine. As they entered the room, the door slammed shut behind them with a resonant thud. They were trapped. Zorath's breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary room. This was the heart of the warship, the source of its power, and whatever lay within it was more than they could have anticipated. "Stay close," Zorath commanded, his voice low but steady. "We don't know what this place is. We must proceed carefully." The crew, despite their fear, obeyed. They moved deeper into the room, their steps echoing across the silent space. The hum of the core grew louder with each step, vibrating through their bodies. Zorath couldn't help but feel drawn to it. There was something magnetic about it, something that called to him. It was as if the core itself was alive, and it wanted him to approach. Zorath reached out, his fingers brushing against the smooth surface of the core. The moment he made contact, the room trembled. A shockwave of energy shot through the ship, sending the crew stumbling. The core glowed brighter, and the rooms on the floor flared to life, casting the room in a blinding light. Then the core emitted a low guttural sound, a voice, but not one they could understand. It was a language far older than any civilization Zorath had encountered. The symbols on the walls shifted, rearranging themselves into new patterns. The ship was responding to them, and it was as if the core had recognized Zorath's presence. Suddenly, a holographic image appeared in the center of the room, filling the space with an image of a vast battlefield. The crew members gasped as they saw what appeared to be humans, but not like any they had seen before. These humans were adorned in ancient armor, their weapons unlike anything the aliens had ever encountered. They stood at the head of a massive army, facing off against an unimaginable enemy, giant, monstrous creatures that dwarfed even the largest warships. The scene was a moment frozen in time, a battle that had occurred long ago. The humans were fighting for survival, but it was clear that they were not just defending their world. They were conquering, expanding, and their power was unimaginable. Zorath watched in awe as the humans unleashed their devastating weapons, sending the monstrous creatures fleeing before them. "This is impossible," one of the officers whispered. These humans, they were warriors, masters of war. The image shifted again, showing a massive ship, one that dwarfed anything the aliens had ever seen. It was a warship, but not like any other. Its design was alien in its complexity, yet unmistakably human. The ship was an unstoppable force, capable of annihilating entire fleets in an instant. And at the helm of the ship stood a human figure, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. This was no ordinary human. This was someone, or something, beyond even the mightiest of warriors. A hologram flickered, and the voice from the core began to repeat itself, but this time it was clearer, more distinct. Zorath could make out a few words, fragments of the message. "Return. Awaken. The weapon." The crew exchanged nervous glances. The message was undeniable. This ship, this warship, was a weapon. But it was more than just a weapon. It was a message from the past. A message left behind by the humans who had once wielded such power. And now, it seemed, the ship was calling them, urging them to awaken something. But what? "We need to leave," one of the officers said, his voice trembling with fear. "This is too much. We've already seen more than enough." Zorath shook his head. "No, we can't leave now. This ship holds the answers we need. It holds the key to everything." Zorath's gaze locked onto the glowing symbols on the walls. He could feel the ship's energy intensifying, its power growing stronger by the second. It was as if the ship was alive, feeding off their presence, urging them to move forward. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach. The ship was not just a weapon. It was a message, and he knew, deep down, that he was meant to uncover it. "We're going deeper," Zoreth declared, his voice filled with determination. "We have to uncover what the humans left behind. This ship is more than just a weapon. It's a key to something far greater. We can't leave without knowing what it is." The crew hesitated, but Zoreth's resolve was unshakable. One by one, they followed him, their fear giving way to curiosity and the promise of discovery. The path ahead was uncertain, but there was no turning back now. They had crossed a threshold, and the warship's secrets were waiting to be uncovered. As they moved deeper into the heart of the ship, the very walls seemed to whisper, guiding them toward their destiny. And with each step, Zoreth could feel the weight of the warship's power pressing down on them. Whatever lay ahead, they were no longer just explorers. They were part of something much bigger, a legacy left behind by a species far more powerful than any of them could have imagined. The door to the next chamber opened, and the crew stepped into the unknown. The true nature of the ship, and the humans who had built it, was about to be revealed. The chamber they entered was unlike anything they had seen before. The air was thick with a strange energy, and the walls were covered in intricate markings, symbols that seemed to pulse with life. The floor beneath their feet was smooth, almost polished, but it was the central feature of the room that caught their attention. The enormous pedestal standing in the middle. It was made of a dark metal, gleaming even in the low light, and upon it rested a human figure. At first, the crew thought it was merely a statue, frozen in time. But as Zoreth stepped closer, he felt a strange pull, a magnetic force urging him forward. His eyes widened as he realized the figure was not stone or metal. It was flesh. The human figure was lying perfectly still, suspended in a deep state of stasis. "Is this a human?" one of the officers whispered, his voice trembling with awe. Zoreth nodded slowly. "Yes, but this one is different. Look at the markings." The human's body was covered in strange tattoos, symbols that were similar to those on the walls, glowing faintly. They weren't just decorative. They were a language, a form of communication. As Zoreth stood over the figure, the room seemed to hum louder, and the markings began to shift, rearranging themselves as if reacting to his presence. Without thinking, Zoreth reached out and placed his hand on the pedestal. The moment his fingers made contact, the figure on the pedestal stirred. The air around them crackled with energy, and the room's temperature seemed to rise. "No, stay back," one of the crew shouted, but it was too late. The human's eyes snapped open, glowing with an unnatural light. The crew stepped back in shock as the human slowly rose from the pedestal, the markings on its skin shifting in sync with the movement. The figure was tall, with sharp features, but it wasn't the appearance that startled them. It was the power radiating from the being, an aura that made the very air seem heavy. The human stood before them, silent for a moment, as if assessing the alien crew before it. Zoreth could feel the weight of its gaze. It was as if the human could see straight through him, as though it knew everything about them, their mission, their intentions, and their fears. Then the human spoke. Its voice was not a sound, but a presence reverberating within their minds. "You have awakened me," it said, the words echoing in Zoreth's mind. "But it is not me you should fear. It is the others. They are coming." The words were like a cold gust of wind, leaving the crew in a state of shock and confusion. Who was this human? And what did it mean by the others? Before Zoreth could respond, the figure continued. "I was the last of them. The last of the warriors who fought beside the ancient fleet. We were the guardians of the galaxy, the protectors of humanity's legacy. But something went wrong. Something I couldn't stop. And now, the galaxy is about to face the consequences." The human's eyes glowed brighter, and Zoreth felt a surge of energy within the room, almost as if the very walls were alive. He could see the intensity in the human's gaze, its power, its knowledge, and its pain. "What happened?" Zoreth asked, his voice barely a whisper. The crew remained silent, waiting for the answer. "The war," the human said simply. "The war that tore everything apart. the war that caused us to retreat. But we left a part of ourselves behind. A weapon, a force beyond understanding. And now it stirs. It is time for you to decide, Zorath. Will you embrace it? Will you awaken the weapon? Zorath's heart pounded in his chest. The weight of the human's words settled on him like a heavy stone. He understood the gravity of what was being asked. This was not just a ship. This was not just a warship. It was a key to a force of unimaginable power. What is this weapon? Zorath asked, his voice trembling. The human's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. It is humanity's last hope, and its greatest curse. The room fell silent again. The crew was stunned, processing the magnitude of what they were hearing. They had uncovered something beyond their comprehension. A weapon so powerful that it had been hidden away, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. Zorath's mind raced. This was more than just a ship. It was a force capable of changing the fate of the galaxy itself. But the question remained, was humanity ready for such power? And more importantly, were the aliens prepared for the consequences of unleashing it? The human turned toward the pedestal again, raising a hand as if to summon something. The room trembled once more, the walls shifting and warping as energy surged from the core below. The symbols on the walls flared with light, the air crackling with raw, untamed power. The human's voice echoed once more, a command this time. "Prepare yourself," it said. "The others are coming. You have awakened the weapon, and now the galaxy will tremble." As the last words hung in the air, Zorath knew that there was no turning back. The galaxy was about to face something it could never have imagined, and the human legacy, with all its power and danger, was about to be unleashed upon the universe once again. The room seemed to pulse with energy, the very air alive with the power that had been unleashed. The human figure stood motionless, but Zorath could feel its presence intensify, like a storm gathering on the horizon. He had seen many things in his time as a leader, but nothing like this. The power before him was beyond anything he could have ever imagined. It was as if the ship itself was alive, responding to the human's command, and it was waiting for something, waiting for them to decide what to do next. The crew gathered around, their faces etched with a mix of awe, fear, and uncertainty. Zorath glanced at each of them, reading their expressions. They had all come this far, venturing deep into the heart of the galaxy, and now they were standing at the precipice of something much larger than themselves, something they could not fully comprehend. "Do we awaken it?" one of the officers asked, his voice low and unsure. "What happens if we do?" Zorath turned toward the human, who stood silently, its glowing eyes never leaving them. The room felt colder now, as if the very essence of the place had shifted in response to the question. The human spoke again, its voice like a distant thunderclap, echoing in their minds. "You have no choice," it said, the words weighty with finality. "You are already part of this now. The weapon has been awakened, and the galaxy will feel its wrath." Zorath took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He had always prided himself on being a leader who could think quickly. But this was different. This was not a simple decision. This was the fate of the galaxy at stake. The human's words had been cryptic, but one thing was clear. They had unleashed something that could change everything. "What is this weapon?" Zorath demanded. "What does it do?" The human's gaze deepened, and for a moment, it seemed as though time itself stood still. "It is a force," it replied, its voice softer now, more personal. "A force born of humanity's darkest hour. It is a weapon, yes, but it is also a reflection of humanity's spirit, their ability to fight against insurmountable odds. When they were pushed to the edge, they created it. And now you must decide whether to control it or let it consume you." Zorath clenched his fists. The weight of the choice before him was suffocating. Could they control such power? Could any of them? He wasn't sure. The human had mentioned that the weapon had been created in a time of crisis, during a war so brutal that it had left scars across the galaxy. It was a last-ditch effort, a weapon born out of necessity, not desire. But as Zoreth looked at the human, standing there with its glowing eyes, he realized that they couldn't turn back. The galaxy was already in motion, and they had already set things in motion with their discovery. There was no undoing what had been done. The weapon had been awakened. And now, they had to deal with the consequences. "We don't have much time," the human said, its voice once again resonating in their minds. "The others are coming. You must make your decision quickly. They will stop at nothing to claim the power you've awakened." Zoreth turned to his crew, meeting each of their eyes. The reality of what they had discovered was settling in, but there was no time to dwell on it. The threat was real. The galaxy was on the brink, and they had a decision to make. "Prepare yourselves," Zoreth commanded. "We move out now. We need to get back to the fleet and prepare for what's to come. The galaxy will not wait for us to make up our minds." As they made their way back to their ship, the human figure did not follow. Instead, it stood in the center of the chamber, its eyes burning with an intensity that made Zoreth's skin crawl. The figure spoke one final time, its voice heavy with foreboding. "You have no idea what you've unleashed," it warned. "But soon you will." The crew hurried to their ship, the weight of the human's warning echoing in their minds. As the ship took off from the station, Zoreth looked back at the glowing structure, knowing that it would be the last time they saw it like this. The galaxy was on the brink of war, and the weapon was now part of the equation. They had awakened something ancient and powerful, and there would be no going back. As they left the station behind, Zoreth felt the pressure of the galaxy's fate resting heavily on his shoulders. The choices they made in the coming days would shape the future of everything. And whether they would be ready for the storm they had awakened, only time would tell.